I used to think working overnight security at a distribution warehouse would be one of the easiest jobs I could get. The building was in an industrial part of Columbus, Ohio, surrounded by other warehouses that all shut down by around 8 p.m. After that, it was just me. A few dim parking lot lights, and a wall of security monitors in a small office near the loading dock. My job was simple. Watch the cameras, log any unusual activity, and do a perimeter walk every couple of hours. Most nights were completely uneventful, and I'd spend the time watching YouTube or scrolling my phone while occasionally glancing up at the screen. The system had 12 cameras covering the interior and exterior of the building. I got familiar with them pretty quickly. Camera 1 showed the main gate. Camera 2 covered the front office entrance.
Still empty.
Camera 3 looked down one of the longer interior aisles filled with stacked pallets, and so on. It became routine.
I saw something move.
I knew what everything looked like at night, down to how the shadows stretched across the concrete floors when the motion lights kicked
Did you
on.
hear that?
The first thing that felt off happened about a week into the job. I was doing a routine check of the monitors when I noticed something strange on camera 3.
The hallway is
At
supposed
first,
to be empty.
it didn't even register as anything serious.
Here, on the screen.
It just looked like the image had slightly shifted, like the angle was off by a few
Is that
degrees.
real?
The aisle it covered was still visible, but the camera seemed to be pointing more toward the ceiling than usual.
Line.
I assumed it was a glitch, or maybe the mount had loosened.
Something is here.
I made a note of it in the logbook and figured maintenance would handle it in the morning. It wasn't a big deal, just something slightly out of place.
3 is normal,
But the next night,
normal,
when I came in for my shift,
normal.
camera 3 looked completely normal again. Same angle as before, same clear view down the aisle.
Fun.
I checked the maintenance log out of curiosity, and there was no mention of any repair. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I just figured someone had fixed it quickly and forgot to log it. That kind of thing happens. A couple of nights later, I noticed it again. Same camera, same aisle, but this time the angle was even more off. It wasn't subtle anymore. The camera was tilted enough that the bottom half of the frame was mostly the ceiling beams, and only a narrow strip of the floor was visible. It was basically
I
useless
told
for
you
monitoring
it was
anything.
to come here.
That's when I started paying closer attention. I rewound the footage using the system and tried to see when it had changed. The weird part was,
Saw something
there wasn't a
on
clear
the
moment where the camera shifted. One frame it looked
Are you
normal,
sure it's not just a
and then suddenly, in the next timestamp, the angle was different. No gradual movement,
glitch? Someone's in the
no
system.
visible cause. I remember leaning closer to the screen, trying to convince myself it was just a recording glitch. The system wasn't exactly
Wrong
high-end,
with this feed.
so I figured maybe it skipped frames or something.
It keeps jumping.
Still, it bothered me enough that I grabbed a flashlight and decided to check the aisle in person.
What is that?
Walking through that warehouse at night always felt a little different than during the day.
Anyone here?
Everything echoed more, and the rows of pallets seemed taller somehow.
Is there something moving in here?
When I got to the aisle covered by camera 3, I looked up at where the camera was mounted.
There it is. Camera
It looked
3.
perfectly straight, not tilted, not
All right,
loose.
There it is. Camera 3.
Exactly how it should be. That didn't make sense. I stood there for a minute, comparing what I saw in real life to what I'd just seen on the monitor. Then I went back to the office and checked the screen again. Still tilted,
Hello?
still wrong. That was probably
Someone
the
there?
first moment I felt something I couldn't explain. Over the next few nights, it kept happening.
Just for a second.
Always camera 3. Always the same pattern. It would be normal at the start of my shift. Then at some point, usually after midnight,
I see
it would shift to that useless angle. And every time I checked it physically, the camera itself hadn't moved at all.
Is it not uprighting
I
itself?
started documenting it more carefully,
I saw it.
writing down exact times and taking pictures of the monitor with my phone.
We have to stop this now.
I even tried to catch the moment it changed, but I never saw it happen live. It was always something I noticed after the fact. About 2 weeks into the job, Things escalated. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and I was halfway through my shift.
I've been staring at this.
I was staring at the monitors more than usual at that point, mostly out of habit. Camera 3 had already shifted again, and I was debating whether it was worth calling my supervisor about it. That's when I noticed something else.
I swear I heard
In the narrow strip of floor still visible on camera 3, there was movement. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, like maybe one of the motion sensors had triggered. But then I saw it again. A shadow moving across the bottom of the frame, not a flicker, not a glitch. A clear, defined shadow, like someone walking past. I froze for a second, trying to process what I was seeing. No one else was supposed to be in the building. The warehouse was completely shut down overnight, and I was the only one on shift.
No.
I grabbed my radio and called it in, even though there was no one else to respond. It was more of a reflex than anything. Then I picked up my flashlight and headed toward the aisle. As I walked through the warehouse, everything felt louder than usual.
No response.
My footsteps, the hum of the lights,
No, don't leave me here.
even my breathing. When I reached the aisle, I slowed down and shined the light down its length. Nothing. Just stacks of pallets and empty space. I checked both ends of the aisle, looked behind the stacks, even walked a full loop around the surrounding area. There was no one there. No open doors, no signs of entry. I told myself it had to be a shadow from outside. Maybe a car passing by the far end of the building. It wasn't a great explanation,
But there's nothing.
but it was the only one that made sense at the time.
Where are they? Over there.
When I got back to the office, I rewound the footage again.
I can't see them.
This time, I watched it frame by frame.
Let's go.
The shadow was there, clear as day, moving from left to right across that thin strip of visible floor. But there was no source, no person visible, just the shadow. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach
Go
drop.
back.
At the very edge of the frame, barely visible,
Did you see
there was a
that?
second shadow.
Rewind, I said.
It wasn't moving. It was just there, like someone standing just outside the camera's view. I sat there staring at it for a long time, trying to figure out what I was looking at. It didn't move. It didn't change. It just stayed in that same spot.
Saw him. He's here.
The next night, I came in earlier than usual.
Yes, right on the monitor.
I wanted to check something before it got too late. I went straight to that aisle and looked up at the camera again.
What is that?
Same as always,
You shouldn't
perfectly
be
straight.
here.
But this time,
Get
I
him.
noticed something else. There was a small device attached
see
to the
that?
side of the camera
You
housing.
see there?
It was black,
It's right there.
about the size of a matchbox,
Still.
and it definitely hadn't been there before. It blended in well enough that I probably wouldn't have noticed it if I wasn't specifically looking. I climbed up on one of the lower pallet stacks to get a closer look. It looked like some kind of wireless transmitter or maybe a secondary lens.
Here.
There was a tiny pinhole on one side of it. I didn't touch it.
Still there.
I just climbed down and went back to the
Doesn't
office.
it ever move? No.
That's when everything started to click
Never.
in a way I didn't like.
I'm almost there.
The angle changes, the missing frames,
Don't fall.
the shadows that didn't line up with anything in the room. It didn't feel like a malfunction anymore. It felt like someone was controlling what I could see. I checked the rest of the cameras more carefully after
Signal is
that.
coming from right here.
Most of them looked normal. But camera 7, the one covering the break room,
It's in the
had a slight delay compared to the others. It was only a couple of seconds, but it was noticeable if you paid attention. I reported everything to my supervisor the next morning. He took it seriously enough to send someone out to inspect the system. They found the device on camera 3, along with 2 others on different cameras. None of them were part of the original setup. The official explanation was that someone had gotten into the building during the day and installed unauthorized equipment. They said it could have been an attempt to steal inventory or gather information about the facility. They removed the devices, reset the system, and told me everything was fine. But they never explained the shadows. They never explained why camera 3 always shifted at the same time every night. And they definitely never explained why. When I reviewed the footage from earlier nights after the devices were removed, the second shadow, the one that never moved, was still there,
The footage.
even on nights before the device supposedly existed.
What is that? The shadow.
I
is
quit
still
that
there.
job a week later. Sometimes I still think about that second shadow, just standing there at the edge of the frame, perfectly still. And the part that bothers me the most is that it always looked like it was facing directly toward the camera.